Hello everyone, I'm going to give a quick primer from zero to actually getting an Android application working. So starting fresh using Android Studio. So the first thing you're going to do is download Android Studio. So just search in your favorite search engine for Android Studio and then click the big green download button. In this case I'm doing it on a Mac, but the instructions are basically the same for any operating system, and Android Studio is going to function the same way on any OS. Once you get it downloaded and drag it into your applications folder, you'll go ahead and just run it. And at this point, it should require us to install some SDKs. So here we are in a setup wizard for it. We can see all the different things that Android runs on in a nice little greeting window. And we'll go ahead and just choose standard. So here it's going to give us some of the basic things that we need to get installed. We're going to go ahead and just accept each license. So click on these little license tabs and press accept, and then we can move on to the next step. So we go ahead and hit finish, and it's going to download all the components that it needs. These are the different SDKs and emulator tools and other things. So while we wait for this to download, I will take some time to mention that Android Studio is now the official supported method of developing Android apps. So the old Eclipse method and using Ant and all that are deprecated now. They're obsolete. So Android Studio is the new way to do it, and that's actually a good thing because Android Studio it's built on IntelliJ, and it's built specifically with the purpose of developing Android apps. So there's a lot of good tools in it. It's become really refined over the last year. So everything moving forward should be built in Android Studio for the best possible experience. So if you're starting fresh, this is great because you'll just have the fresh knowledge, be up to date right from the get-go. Once the install is finished, it'll automatically create a virtual device for us, which is good, and install a whole bunch of other stuff. So we'll go ahead and hit finish, and this takes us to this opening screen, which is what you're going to see anytime you open up Android Studio from here on out. So in this case, we're going to make a new Android Studio project. In this case, we're just going to call it Hello World application. For the company domain, this is basically going to be whatever your website is, or really anything you want, depending on what you're creating. And then this is going to be separated out into a reverse DNS style. So in the case of maybe like a Google application, you could say like hangouts.google.com, and then that would be translated to com.google.hangouts, Hello World application. And this makes it really easy to split off whether something's a commercial package and then who owns it, and then what the sub package is in the actual application. In this case, we're just going to say jackspot.me, and this creates the me.jackspot.hello world application. If you don't care about this, it doesn't really matter, just put something in there. In this case, we're going to use the default ice cream sandwich minimum SDK. Basically, the higher SDK or the higher API level that you use, the more features you'll have access to, but the less devices you'll support. And there's actually a helpful little graph if you click the Help Me Choose button that'll show basically the proportions of how many devices have which operating system, which API level you can target. In this case, we're not doing anything fancy, so we'll keep it on ice cream sandwich, but it could be safe to use KitKat or Jelly Bean if you wanted to. In this case, we'll go ahead and start with a blank activity. And we'll just leave this default. Now Android Studio is going to do a whole bunch of calculations and basically set up a scaffold project for us with all the components that we need, including the Gradle build tool, our activity, some resource files, a manifest, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'll explain briefly so that you'll know what to search for. Because there's a lot of terms with the Android development that are very specific to it that don't really carry over to even like iOS development or web development or anything else. So they're really not that complicated, but you have to know what each term refers to so that you know what you're looking for. When you get stuck and you have to search for things on Stack Overflow or whatever. So we'll go ahead and let Android Studio do its thing and get this project ready, and then I'll explain a couple of things just so you know what we're looking at. So we have this oh so helpful tip. These will actually, if you go through them, if you leave these turned on, it'll give you a couple of helpful pointers anytime you're working on something, or basically whenever you start, about helpful pointers for when you're working on things, like how to open up classes easily, or autocomplete, stuff like that. So right now it's setting up the design view. So Android Studio comes with a nice visual design tool that helps you design applications visually. So this is similar to Xcode or Visual Studio, and where you can actually drag and drop different components and make sure that they're aligned exactly where you want them to be. So here we have, a basic Nexus phone, and then some Hello World text that's going to be on the application page. So right now it's just finishing up indexing everything in our project so we can search through it easily, but I'll go ahead and start explaining things. So there's 3 main folders over here on the left in the file tree. The first one is Manifest. So this is where Android Manifest is. The Android Manifest is where you put your application permissions, what activities you have, and what intents there are. So anytime someone lists out like a permission that you need, it's going to go in this file. Anytime you create a new activity with Android Studio, it's going to add a definition to this file. The application name is here, etc., etc. So this is basically the install definition for your application. Then we have the Java folder, which is, as you would expect, Java code. So this is going to be the logic for the application. This is going to be, everything from setting up the view and adding a basic menu to it, to configuring what happens when you click a button, to pulling stuff off the internet, to whatever. It's the logic code that drives the application. And then we have resources, and these are going to be images or XML files that get referenced from the logic or into the view. So here we have like the application icon in a whole bunch of different resolutions. And then here we have the layout XML, which we were just looking at. This is the visual representation of this XML code. So it's, in a way, it's kind of like HTML in the sense that you have you're writing XML code to then define what components get put onto the screen. And this is called an activity. So an activity is a page, basically. It's what the user is looking at, in simplest terms, I guess. So each activity, you'll have like a main activity or a login activity or a settings activity, and those are just going to be the visual page that the user is going to look at. And then, of course, like pressing back on an activity will take you back to the previous activity. So that's just the terminology that's used in Android. Then we have menus, which just define the little, like the little 3 dots on the right side of an activity. So this is going to be the menu for our main activity, which includes a settings button. So as you'll see here, these strings are actually defined as @string / and then which string resource we're loading. Android Studio will often translate this for us and show us what it actually is. So if we actually go to the declaration of it, we'll see that here in the strings XML file, we have string name equals and then action settings, and then the actual human value of it is settings. So whenever you're creating a string, you'll usually create a resource for it and put it inside the strings file. So it's a string table for your applications, and this is really useful if you have to translate your application into different locales, because this way all of your code can just say, like, this is the text that gets put on the settings button, and then you can translate that to whatever language you need. And then there's like a helpful editor here that'll help you translate things if you want to release to different markets. And then there's like dimension stuff for like defining like margins and stuff on your application. It's not particularly important for this tutorial right now. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure that our application is going to run correctly. So we're going to go and just press this little play button. And this is going to build the application. So we'll see that Gradle, which is the build tool for Android Studio, is going to be executing these tasks. So at this point, we're ready to run our application. If you plugged in your phone, you would see it under choose a running device. And this would allow you to actually run it on your phone. you'll probably get a prompt on your phone that says like accept this, and you might need to install drivers if you're on Windows, but it would show up here as an ADB device, and you could actually run your application on your phone to test it out. For the case of this tutorial, I'm going to use the emulator it created for us. So you can see what's actually happening on the screen pretty easily, and it will kind of show a little bit about how emulators work. So it's possible that this might take a while for the emulator to load up, because it has to actually boot up an emulated device. So this occasionally takes quite some time. So this emulator actually comes with a Nexus 5 skin around it, so it'll actually look like a physical device. It doesn't really mean anything, it just helps you get a good idea of, I don't know, what it would look like on a physical device with that aspect ratio. It just kind of looks cool. So again, this might take quite some time to boot up, so we'll just have to be patient with it, but when it does, we'll get a fully working emulated Android device that we can then run our application on. And here we have our emulator booted up, so that was actually a lot faster than I expected. And this over here should now run the install on this emulator. So in a little bit, we should see our application pop up on this screen. And there we have it. Here we have our Hello World application. So far so good. Everything's working fine, and now we can dive in and actually start writing some code and getting an example application running to play around with. So let's go ahead and just talk a little bit about what's going on in Android Studio. So here we have the debugger tool, which is going to let us look at whatever logs are coming out of the device, and we can filter it to show only stuff coming out of our application. So I'll show you how to add log statements real quick. Basically, generally every class file you have is going to have a tag. So you'll say like static string tag equals main activity. And then anytime you want to make a log statement, you'll say log dot and then either I or E or D, depending on whether it's just information or a debug or an error. So just depending on the log level, and then whatever tag you want. So we define the tag so we can group together any log statements in this particular class. We can group them all together, and I'll have to retype the same tag. And then whatever we want, like application is running. Yay. And then we'll go ahead and press Option Enter, or whatever the key combo is on Windows, to import the class. So then over here we have imported android.util.log. Then we'll run it again, and we should see our log statement down here. So this is, your basic low-level tool for debugging. Just console log, or printing out in C, or system.out.println in Java. In Android, you're going to use log.i, log.d, log.e to get your logs together. And just in terms of tags, like here we can see, here's a debug statement from OpenGL Renderer, here's a warning from OpenGL Renderer. So these are all using the OpenGL Renderer tag to group them all together. So here we have our application over here, and then if we look over through these debug statements, we can actually see application is running. Yay! So there's our debug statement. We can actually filter that and just search for like main activity. And then we have just the logs here, so we don't have to go through all of the logcat. So let's get to actually writing some code. We're going to add a basic button onto this. So we're going to go through these different widgets, and we're going to grab a button. We're just going to plop it right in the middle. So in Android, everything is anchored somewhere. So it's either anchored to another component or anchored to the side of the screen. We generally would not use like pixel locations, because every device is it has a different aspect ratio. There's tons and tons of different aspect ratios in Android, so it's just easier to make sure it's consistent across different devices to anchor them to something else so it'll scale properly. So here we have our new button. I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see it. Here it is right in the center of the screen. We actually want to change the text on it, so let's find. Here we have the text for new button. We're actually going to make a string because we're going to follow some good standards here. We're going to make a new string for this. We're going to call this button do something. And the value is just going to be do something. This is going to create a new string in our strings file that was then going to get referenced over here. So now the text is do something, and then here in the actual code, we can see the text is defined at string button/do something. Then this ID statement is going to give the button an ID. If there's a plus here, it's going to actually create a new ID for this particular view, and then shove that into this R class that I'll show you in a second. So in this case, I want to be a little more specific and call this BT and do something. Now when we go into our Java code, we want to actually attach some sort of event listener onto that button. So we're gonna create a class, a reference to that button from here. So it's important that this goes after the set content view because the content view is going to load everything into the view. So we're going to say BT and do something equals, and then find view by ID. This is going to be our friend that that allows us to find things in the particular view. Then we're going to do r.id.bt and do something. So we can see there's that ID that we defined. It's now in this R class that gets generated based on what we put in those XML files. And we actually need to cast this as a type of a button, and then import the button class. Now we have our button class up there. And we want to attach some sort of event listener, so we'll BT and do something dot set on click, or yeah, set on click listener, new on click listener, and autocomplete is our friend here. It's going to create a new event listening class for us. And in this case, we'll just do another log statement. And then from here, let's go ahead and run it again. And we'll go ahead and say we want to use this same device every time we launch, just to save us some sanity. And now we can see whenever we click the button, we get button was collected down here in the logs. So this button is now executing that code that's inside of that. So now we actually have a useful, well, not particularly useful, but we now have actual code running on the Android device. It's very cool. You know, we can now start adding in different components and having the application do different things. So any other bit of information I'm going to include in other tutorials, or you can reference the Android docs or other examples, but I wanted to get a nice boilerplate together to just show how to start from 0 to something with Android Studio, so you can finally get your first Android app written and just get all that anxiety out of the way. So the last thing I'm going to do is show how to create a new activity. So in this case, we're going to hit File, New. It's going to pop up this, and we want an activity. We want a blank activity. In this case, we'll call it settings activity. And in this case, we'll go ahead and change that text to say something a little bit different. So new resource, new string value, settings greeting. Welcome to the settings page. And here we have that. So now we have this new activity. Now we want to be able to get to it from the main activity. Well, the main activity was pre-built with this this menu inflator that's going to add whatever's in this this menu file over here. It's going to add into the menu on this. So if we look over here, when you click these three dots, you get the settings thing that's defined in that menu file. And then down here is going to listen for different menu events. And it already has the one for settings, but it doesn't do anything. So in this case, we're actually going to try to show that we're going to open up that settings activity when you click that button. So to do this, we're going to make a new intent. So an intent is it's the generic way of telling the operating system that we want something to happen, right? We want either like a file picker to open, or a new page to open, or we want to start a new service, anything like that is going to go through this intent thing. So you're going to make a new intent, and the first parameter is going to be the current context. In this case, it'll be this. If you have a subclass, you'll want to cast something out like context ctx equals this, stuff like that. And then we're going to tell it what we want to actually open, so we're going to say settings activity.class. And then we can simply just say start activity intent, and this will load up that new page. Then from here, we'll just run it again. So here we have our main activity. You can still click this button. If we hover here, press the settings thing, it'll open up this new settings activity. And then if we press back, we get back to our main activity. So here we have a very simple workflow, but it hopefully should explain a lot about how Android Studio works, how Android development works, what a lot of this terminology is. And hopefully this will act as a good boilerplate to get you started developing whatever it is you want to with Android. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to look into making some more of these if people like them, and try to share some of the knowledge I've gained about Android, because I just started learning it about 6 months ago, and I don't know, it's been really nice to be able to see what other people have done and to build off of other people's knowledge. So hopefully this is able to put back into the community and help other people get started with Android. Seems really scary at first, but Google has really made the tools a lot easier to use lately. And I don't know, it's actually become a lot easier than it used to be, and I don't know, it's just fun. So hopefully you liked the video. If you have any comments or constructive criticism, be sure to let me know. And other than that, have a great day.